I'm Sean. This is my friend Aaron, and he's going to give us his testimony to Jesus Christ. Go ahead, Aaron.
Hello, my name is Aaron. I'm just going to tell you a little bit about myself, like where I came from, where I'm at now, and where I feel like God is taking me because He's truly, changed my entire life. The Bible says we're a new creation. That's almost not even a strong enough word. I don't even have the same thoughts that I used to have. So I'll go into this. I'm 38 years old. I'm from Phoenix, Arizona. I grew up in about 49th Street in Thunderbird, and then we moved out to Cave Creek area. My parents live off Carefree Highway, 24th Street. In case you're familiar with the area, that's like North Phoenix area. Uh, I come from a white middle class family. There wasn't really, my parents drank a little bit when I was a kid. We have some addictions on my mom's side that I know of for sure. And my dad is adopted in a closed adoption. So we don't really know about that side. But I'm just going to show you how the devil it doesn't matter. He doesn't play favorites or he doesn't pick on certain people. He got a hold of me bad over the years, destroyed my life with drugs. I was in Boy Scouts for a while, was in public school for quite a while. So my parents pulled me out because of issues in school. And, there's a lot of really bad stuff going on in public schools, even back then in the 90s. And then I ended up going to a private school for a couple of years at a charter school. I started smoking weed, tried smoking weed when I was in eighth grade, I think it was, drank alcohol when I was in like seventh grade. I was exposed to pornography, I think, when I was like 11 years old. And all those things started the downward spiral of my life slowly, but surely. And it just led to worse stuff over the years. I was addicted to pornography, watching it pretty regularly when I was I think I was about 12 or so, that kind of dial-up internet, and it was bad looking back at it. It was a regular thing back then when I was in high school and stuff like that. The marijuana progressed to smoking regularly in high school, drinking on the weekends. Let me go back for a second and say we didn't really go to church when I was a kid. My parents said we were Christians, but they brought us up on some kind of Christian morals, but we never went to church because I come to find out they had some church hurt, and we just never. I didn't really know much about Jesus. Some friends of mine, a friend of my grandmother tried to bring me to church sometimes, and I went to church a few times with some of my parents' friends, but I didn't really go to church until my parents became more active in church when I was in high school, but by that point I was already gone in the world, and I just didn't want to go to church much really, and I had a lot of bad views about it because there's a lot of fake hypocrisy stuff in the church if you look at it from the outside. If you don't understand what God's about and about how it's a relationship with God, not necessarily judging by the people that are in the church because we're all broken. And so, yeah, I started doing harder drugs some in high school, randomly doing some cocaine and did some mushrooms and some LSD. I progressed to worse, smoking weed all the time towards the end of my high school career. I graduated from high school, and then I was 18 years old. Me and my dad were having a lot of issues. I didn't really know what I wanted to do with my life. I didn't really have much drive or purpose, so I decided to join the army because some of my friends had joined it, and I don't know, I just wanted to get out of the state. I was kind of miserable, didn't really had bad self-esteem, and just didn't have much of a drive to do or didn't know what I wanted to do. I changed my idea of what I wanted to do several times, because I took a little bit of college before then, but I just didn't really know what I wanted to do. It was sad. I had no drive and no purpose. And I joined the army. It was the first time I had been away from my parents really for extended periods of time. So it was eye opening. I went to basic training in Fort Leonard Wood in Missouri. And I went from Arizona in February to Missouri in February. That was a big change of climates. It was really cold there. Uh, then I ended up going up to Washington State after I was done with my training. Was up there for a few years. When I turned into a really bad alcoholic up there. I got in trouble for failing a drug test in the Army for cocaine. And so I just turned into straight alcohol and caffeine and nicotine, was dipping and smoking cigarettes a lot, because those are the only things you really can do. Other than on occasion, I got a hold of some Vicodin because I kind of lied to the doctors and said, "Oh, my back was hurting" or something like that, and they gave me. That was my first exposure to opiates. Was actually in the army. I'd never tried the opioid class of drugs before, and I liked it a lot, and just was miserable alcoholic. I went to Fort Bliss, Texas, which is in El Paso. I got deployed to Qatar, it's called. It's next to Saudi Arabia. It was a combat zone technically, but God was protecting me. It really wasn't anything dangerous going on there. It was kind of a boring deployment. Become paranoid too. I had started looking up conspiracy theories. I was big on conspiracy theories in the army, and I saw the evil in the world a long time before that. I mean, it's hard to not see the evil of this world. There's very obviously, even back then, before I became a believer, there's obviously like some sort of conscious evil that's planning, certain things in this world are happening for reasons that they lie to us about a lot. That's what I consider, just was really big paranoid constantly, and just because the government was always watching, and they probably are watching, but either way, I don't care anymore whether they are or are not doing that. But back then I was definitely paranoid about it, and I just didn't have that many friends. I would sit at home after we got back, for deployment or even before deployment, and just drink by myself a lot, watch porn, play video games. I was big on playing Xbox and stuff. I had some friends, but we would just drink together a lot. It was sad. I didn't really have that many healthy friendships for a lot of my years, because a lot of them revolved around drugs or alcohol. And unfortunately, you just can't really have that many truly good friends if most of your activities together involve drugs or alcohol, because that addictions make people into liars a lot of times and manipulators, and the drugs or alcohol will take priority over your friendships and stuff like that. Is just how it was. And then I got out of the army in May of 2010, excuse me, and I went to school, had a house with some friends of mine. We went to school at Paradise Valley Community College, had a house near there. Had a bunch of money saved up for my deployment, because you get paid extra money and you're tax free and all sorts of stuff, and just started partying a lot, even harder than I was before. Like partying, had a kegerator, we had big parties with a bunch of people, and that's when I was really exposed to. I was smoking weed regularly too, but that's when I was exposed to Percocet 30s, oxycodone 30s, and that literally went boom, just destroyed my life like a rocket hitting the ground. I mean, I don't even know the time frame honestly, because it was back in 2000, the end of 2010. But by the time that we got done with our lease of that apartment, I was already had pawned off a lot, or that house, sorry. I had pawned off a lot of my stuff and dropped out of school and stuff like that. Spent tens of thousands of dollars that I had saved up on drugs and partying and stuff like that. It was all bad. And thankfully, I still had some income because I was working at the time and stuff. So I got an apartment, I think it was, with a friend. And then I was working for my uncle at the time, and I had got a apartment with my ex-girlfriend. And we had an abortion by that point too, because we were messing around and sleeping around together, without protection and stuff like that. It was just all bad. I was full of shame, hiding it from my family and stuff like that, because I never knew how bad addiction really was until the opiates got a hold of me. And they were needed all the time to function. I needed them to not get sick, needed them to go to work, needed them to go to school, needed them to get up really in the morning. It was bad, miserable. And it did destroy some of my friends' lives too that I was living with and stuff. Like, we stopped talking. I really haven't talked to much of my friends. They were in that house together in years because of the stuff that happened there. It is what it is, unfortunately. But the drugs destroyed a lot of my friendships, or I allowed them to. And like I said, though, we moved out of there, and then my family knew what was going on. They suspected, because I worked for my uncle, but they didn't know until I finally admitted that I was hooked on the pills. And then they ended up, we agreed. I went to rehab for about 30 days, I think it was. It was supposed to be a 90-day program, but I thought I only needed 30 days. I'm good after 30 days. It was secular rehab. I was getting my life in order. And I went, and I went back out and started smoking weed again. And it wasn't that much longer. I don't remember the exact time frames, but I stayed off the opiates for a little bit till I started hanging out with my ex again. And then I went to back to the pills. I was staying at my parents' by that point. I ended up stealing a bunch of stuff from my parents. They found out about it to fund my drug, usage, and that messed up our friendship for a long time, or our family for a long time, and our relationship for a long time. Because they didn't trust me. I think it was less than a year later I ended up going. This was by this point it was 2014. I think it was 2015 timeframe. I think it was the end of 2014. Now that I think about it, and they caught me. I had relapsed living with them. My parents did. They had like an intervention thing where a bunch of my family set me down and basically gave me an ultimatum, like, you need to go to rehab or kicking you out of here regardless. You can't stay with us. You need to go to rehab. So I went to rehab again. The same program at the Veterans Affairs. It was an all right program. It was an inpatient program. I went for 100 days this time because I stayed a little extra for a program that I was in for some PTSD treatment stuff from some stuff that happened. I don't know. It helped a lot. I'm not going to lie, but like the secular rehabs, they don't get to the root of the problems really a lot of times. You learn a lot of good skills and life skills and stuff like that, and how to like take your thoughts captive kind of, and a lot of stuff. I'm not saying they're completely useless, but they just don't get to the root of the problems really, because honestly, I didn't understand at the time, but drugs are so spiritual. It's not even funny. Like I just didn't understand it at the time, though. I didn't understand the spirit world, know anything about God at the time. I got out of rehab. I stayed over at this place called US Vets. It's off of, it's down the street from where I'm at now, actually. It's off of 33rd Avenue and Grand Avenue. For those of you who know Phoenix, it's like West Side Phoenix. I had never really been over in this area much. It's a very crime-ridden area, high crime, lots of homeless people, lots of drugs, lots of gangs and stuff like that. It's not that good of an area. And I stayed there. I stayed off the hard drugs. I thought I was good. I'm like, oh, I'm off the opiates. I'm sober, or whatever. But I started smoking weed again, drinking some, was messing around with a bunch of girls because my ex and me weren't talking at the time, messing around with a bunch of girls. And then I ended up getting in contact again with my ex, the one that I was living at the place with that was on pills and stuff like that. And, we got back into the drugs, unfortunately. And this time we were shooting up heroin, instead of just doing pills. We started smoking heroin a while before that, but we started shooting it up. And just progresses, the addiction just gets worse and worse because you're chasing that high. And the shooting up took my life. I was working at UPS at the time, making pretty decent money. And I lost my job because I stole some stuff and they caught me. And thankfully, God's grace was on me, or mercy, because they didn't send me to jail or get me arrested. Mostly every other person that I heard of that stole from that place got taken out in handcuffs. For whatever reason, I didn't, because the head of security happened to be a veteran, and he hooked me up and said, if you just admit to what you stole and you agree to leave for personal reasons, and you can't be hired back, then we're not going to press charges. And I was like, well, all right, yeah. So I kind of lied about what I stole, and then but they believed it, and then they let me sign some personal agreement or personal reasons that I quit, and then I didn't have a job after that, and then I had trouble paying my rent because I was paying rent at the US Vets, because back then it was an apartment for veterans. It wasn't just a program like it is now. It's kind of like a halfway house program now. And my ex was living with me. I let her move in with me, which was terrible. We were fighting all the time. We were starting doing meth by that point too. I never really had done much meth before then. I had tried some Adderall like a year before that, but like I had never really. Meth is a whole nother level of evil in terms of the drug spirit world, stuff like that. We lost our mind. That stuff makes you go crazy. We were constantly fighting, up for days at a time, constantly paranoid, lying, cheating to each other, just constantly, like it was just all bad. And she was on probation at the time, and she ended up getting arrested with our drug dealer with some dope, and she went to prison. And I hadn't paid my rent in a while by that point, and a bunch of my neighbors knew that we were selling drugs out of there and all sorts of bad stuff. They knew, like, because it's not hard in a small little complex, your neighbors are selling drugs and doing drugs out of there for sure. And so I got evicted out of there. This was July of 2016 that I got evicted out of there, summertime. And I didn't want to tell my family I'd relapsed. And so we weren't talking, so they kind of figured it out, like when you just disappear off the face of the earth and stop answering your phone or showing up to stuff, they knew, but they just didn't know how to confront me. And there's nothing that they probably could have said at the time that would have done anything, anyways. So, because I was just so far gone in my addictions, I hated myself, I hated my life, I had terrible self esteem, self worth. I was kind of suicidal at that point and depressed, and just thought that being dead probably wouldn't be much worse than being alive because I felt dead inside for many years, but even especially then was the worst. And meth will make you have those demons that come with the meth will make you have voices in your head that are telling you, that it's better off to kill yourself. Nobody cares, that type of stuff. They're definitely telling me that type of stuff. And so I ended up getting evicted, like I said, in July of 2016, and I ended up being homeless in this area, the area of 35th Avenue and Indian School Road, which is, like I said, on the west side of Phoenix, very high crime area. Never been homeless before. Ended up being homeless then, and I didn't want to contact my family. I was too ashamed to reach out, and I didn't really want to quit the drugs was the problem. That was the thing. I just didn't want to stop. Like I would rather be homeless than stop the drugs at that point. That's how insane they are. Like, never been homeless before. And I didn't really want to be homeless, but I didn't want to stop the drugs. Or I couldn't stop. I wanted to stop, I should say. Somewhere deep inside of me wanted to stop, but I just couldn't. I couldn't. And so something happened that changed my entire life about let's see, it was about 5 weeks after I became homeless. It was September 1st, 2016. I was riding my bicycle across the street at Indian School Road and 33rd Avenue. And I was going, it was the first, like I said, so I got a little money from the VA on the first, and it was like a few $100. It wasn't very much money, but I was going to get some of it to buy some more drugs. And witnesses say I was crossing the street. It was about 9:30 at night on my bicycle with no helmet on, and they said a pickup truck came from behind me when I was in like the crosswalk and came somehow like swiped me, hit me. I went over the hood of the truck and came down on the back of my head in the middle of the street. Some of the witnesses claimed that it almost sounded like a baseball bat breaking. My head hit the ground so hard, and it knocked me out. I had never been knocked out before in my life, but I got cold, clean knocked out. And for the longest, I didn't remember anything until about 3 years later. 3.5 years later, I think it was. And it was in 2020 when I was in jail in solitary confinement. I remembered everything all of a sudden, and I'll go back to where I got hit now. Like, I remembered everything 3.5 years later, but God removed some sort of mental block at that time. And I remembered getting something coming from behind me, and then I remember what happened. And then I had like an out of body experience, and I was floating above my body. I don't know, like 10, 15 feet above my body. I'm looking down, and I was at peace. Never really been at peace much in my life before that, but I felt at peace. Like, I'm not in this deep rooted pain and misery and self-esteem issues and stuff like that, self-hatred that I felt before. And there was a lot of people around because it was a very busy area at night, because there's a lot of strip clubs and bars and stuff in this area. And there people are freaking out. There's a lot of blood pouring out of my head. I look down though, and there's a lot of blood pouring out of my head. I think I'm gonna die. Like, I said it to myself. I think I said it out loud. And then all of a sudden there's like this light and a voice. I don't know. It was very peaceful and comforting. And it almost seemed surreal looking back, really. Like, it's like a movie almost. It was weird. But this voice said, "Aaron, it's not your time." And I was upset because, like I said, I was suicidal at that point. Like, I wanted to be dead, but I was too scared to kill myself. I had believed there was like an afterlife kind of after, I had like these weird pseudo Christian beliefs where like I thought killing myself, I didn't understand what happened after you died, but I knew that killing myself wasn't really the option to do it, but I wanted to be dead. And so when this voice says, "Aaron, it's not your time," I was like, no, like, you gotta let me go. It said, "I can't do that. You're gonna do big things." And I'm like, what does that mean? I'm a homeless heroin addict. And it said, "Just wait and see." And then I woke up in the ICU at St. Joseph's Hospital about 10 hours later. And the doctor, they timed it probably for where they had the ICU was there because he came in. I don't remember most of it, but I remember very key parts. I don't know why, but I remember this part when I first woke up. He's telling me I got hit by a truck. I should be dead. Obviously, I'm not dead. He's telling me all these injuries and all these things that are wrong with me. I had a tube down my throat and I was intubated, so I couldn't speak, couldn't respond to him. And looking back, I think God was speaking through the doctor now, and he was telling me that be grateful I have a harder head than most people because most people's head would have cracked like an egg with the force mine hit the ground with. Yet somehow my skull didn't crack. Was very injured. Don't get me wrong. I'll tell you about the injuries in a second. But he said my head should have cracked like an egg, but it didn't. And he said, be grateful. Thank whoever you need to thank. He would think he was implying God. And he said, then I need to get my life in order. Then he started lecturing me about how I tested positive for meth. They didn't talk about the heroin, but they said I'm tested positive for meth. And I know for a fact I had both and weed in my system too. But he just wanted to lecture me about the meth for whatever reason. And said I needed to get my life in order because I just survived something most people don't survive, basically, is what he was telling me. And figure my life out. And so I had 27 staples in my head. I had a 9.5-inch laceration. I don't think you could see it in the back of my head here, down to my skull. They said it was all the way down to my skull. From blunt force, my head hit the ground so hard that my scalp basically blew up, exploded, and I bled out a lot. I had to get an emergency blood transfusion because I was bleeding to death. They said I was in hypovolemic shock, which is shock from lack of blood volume because I lost so much blood. And I had a tube in my left side, and because my left lung had collapsed, and I had 5 broken ribs on my left side, right next to each other. I guess the truck, I don't know. I assume the truck hit me. I probably came from that side somehow because it broke all my ribs on this side and collapsed my lung. And I had fractures in 3 of my vertebrae, and I had some road rash in random places. My head was like the size of a watermelon. It was all bad. My mom's got some pictures of me in the hospital at some point somewhere. I think I could find them if you want, Sean, for this video. I could get you a picture. And but I wasn't dead though. I was severely injured. They said I should be dead, but I'm not dead. And they came in, and the nurse was telling me that she was telling me all sorts of stuff. I don't remember specifically what it was, but it was on the same stuff that the doctor was telling me about. You should be dead. We don't know how you survived this stuff. They were, reinforcing that most people don't survive this type of stuff. And especially in a condition where they're not in a coma or something like that, and they didn't understand how, I survived. And then I was so addicted to the drugs that they took the tube out about 2 days into it. And I had manipulated them to get them to bring me my backpack, and I was so far gone on the drugs. I had managed to get some drugs out of my bag. I was going to do a shot of heroin in the ICU at the hospital. That's how bad it was. And then the head nurse comes running in there when I'm about to do it. She slaps it out of my hand, says, "What's wrong with you? You trying to kill yourself? We have you on fentanyl, and you die if you did that," and all sorts of stuff. And I'm like, didn't know what to say, All right, yeah. So she hit it out of my hand and said, "Are you trying to kill yourself? Because we have you on fentanyl. If you did that shot, you would die." And I didn't. I don't know. I didn't understand what I was doing. I had a really bad concussion, and I just wanted drugs. I didn't understand really what I was doing. Still looking back, I don't really understand what I was doing. Maybe I was trying to kill myself. I don't know. Or the spirits that were in me were trying to kill me or something. I don't know. But so
my wife a year ago hit her head, and I came home to a bloody mess. She had passed out and hit her head. So the concussion thing and what you're doing in the hospital, she had no idea what was going on. So
yeah,
I get
yeah,
it.
it's exactly. Yeah, I didn't really know. And they had me on fentanyl, and I had a head injury. I was just all whacked out because they had me on anesthetics too. They would put me out for 12 hours, and then they wake me up and they would feed me, and then they would put me back out again. And because they said when I first was in the hospital, they brought me in with the ambulance, they said that I was extremely unruly and uncooperative, and they had to sedate me. And I was thinking yeah, like I almost just died. Like, duh, like I'm not gonna, sorry, like I was probably terrified. I don't know. I probably thought it was that like this date that I don't know, I was this close to death. So yeah, I probably saw God. I probably knew I saw God or heard some voice that was God or an angel, but I just didn't consciously remember it at the time, because I was traumatized. So of course I was freaking out. But so yeah, then they had me being watched after that point in the hospital constantly. And another miracle, though, a miracle I survived, and another miracle, I think I spent only 5 days in the ICU. The nurse told me most other people would spend months in the ICU and in the hospital getting physical rehab, possibly, in a coma, like I said, permanently brain damaged, uh, you know, like handicapped, quadriplegic, something like that. But they let me out. They couldn't figure it out. They did all these, they x-rayed me like 15 times when I was there. They kept trying to find something. They were so baffled about why I was not more injured than I was. I mean, I was pretty injured, but they were like, we don't understand how you're not dead and you're getting out of the hospital in like 5 days. They're like, that's like not ever happens.
You
So
ever run into any of those people?
I have not. I
No.
should go by there sometime.
Go
I see.
by and just talk to them. See if
Yeah, I should. I should. That
okay.
would be. Yeah, I would like to. I got to look up on the medical records about who they were, like, and see if they're still at the hospital.
You
I
thank
should.
them, bring
Go
it,
thank them.
bring them,
Yeah,
say, hey, look what God did.
yeah. Thank you guys for saving my life. Because they did good work. The scar is not that bad for the work that they, because they had to, they stapled up my head pretty bad. They had to clean out the wounds. There was probably asphalt or who knows what was in it. But so yeah, they let me out after 5 days, and I was walking on my own accord. I was very injured, withdrawing off fentanyl that they had me on, and withdrawing off heroin, withdrawing off meth. I really didn't was not happy to be alive. I was mad for a long time that God even didn't let me die. For a long time, I was mad at God for not letting me die. Like for like a long time, like 6 months, a year after the accident, it took me to get over that. So, but yeah, so they let me out. My parents took me to their house for like a couple days, but they straight up told me you're not staying here, like because I had stole stuff from the past, and like they're like we just don't trust you. And they're like you need to. They try to get me to go to Teen Challenge in Tucson, which is about 2.5 hours south east of Phoenix, if you don't know where it is. So I went down there for about, I want to say 5 days. It's a Christian based program. And I was too injured, too hooked on drugs. I laid in my bed for like 5 days, didn't do any of their programming, which they were okay with, but I wasn't okay with being in there by myself in the room. Something was drawing me back to that area, probably the demons and the addiction and stuff. And I called my parents, had them pick me back up again, and they made them drop me off in that area. And then they said that was the hardest thing they ever had to do, but I was an adult, and they were going to do whatever, they were going to let me do whatever, they were just going to cut ties with me. They said they had to cut ties with me. They prayed. My mom said it was the hardest thing she ever had to do, or one of the hardest things, and she just let me go to God and had to pray regularly over me and stuff like that, with some friends of hers in Bible study groups and lots of people were praying over me. They said a bunch while I was on the streets. I went back out on the streets, sadly enough, in the same area because I knew some people, and I was just being familiar. You had drug dealers already in the area. I didn't want to find new dope dealers and stuff like that. Probably was what it really came down to. And so yeah, I then it was weird though because it was a hit and run. The accident, I didn't say that part, but it was a hit and run. The guy left me to bleed to death in the street. Witnesses said he drove off through a parking lot of the bank that's there. There's our Chase Bank there, so he probably was on like 15 different cameras, but for some reason the police didn't really investigate it at all. So God was showing himself to me though in weird ways when I was on the streets, like just weird ways. Like a Bible verse would be painted on like a area where I was sleeping, like John 3:16 was painted on this thing. I had to like look it up because I didn't even know what it was, and people were showing up to me, telling me weird, like almost like prophetic things about angels and demons and how, God's coming to judge the world. And they're like preaching the Bible to me, but it was like hell and brimstone, like scare tactic, like type stuff. Like you need to get your life in order because God's coming back. Jesus is coming back and he's coming to judge the world and all sorts of stuff. I was like getting scared, and didn't understand it at the time. And it was crazy. I was thought I was losing my mind for a long time, and I ended up being homeless though for a total of 2.5 years. A lot of it, 6 months of it, I spent in jail from numerous arrests and stuff like that. And thankfully, Jesus finally got a hold of my heart about, let's see, it was about 2019, and after some of the arrests, I finally started having my heart softened. I went and started attending church and jail several times, while I'm in there and sitting in there and stuff like that. Because you can't survive something that most people don't survive and have it like not make an impact. And like, why am I here? Why did I survive this thing? Most people, don't survive. And why am I alive? And stuff like that. And what purpose does God have for me? Because I knew that God somehow had made me survive that, because there was no other answer in my mind than like, it had to be God, it had to be supernatural of some sort. I was kind of agnostic at the time, so I didn't really want to call it God, but it was like some sort of supernatural thing made me survive this. And I didn't know what it was, and I started softening my heart towards it. And these people, they kept sending in my path constantly and giving me weird testimonies and stuff like that about different stuff was changing my life. And then, let's see, it's a weird set of events happened, and then I got arrested again in, I think it was February or March of 2019, and I went to jail, and then I found Jesus in jail, and because he kept putting people in my jail cell with me that were like preaching the word, and they had Bible, and weird circumstances were happening. I was reading the Bible some, I was reading these devotionals and stuff like that. And it was like stuff was happening to me that was like in line with the Bible, and just weird stuff was happening to me that I couldn't explain, in logical human understanding terms, supernatural stuff was happening to me. And finally, I found Jesus in 2019. No, not finally found him. Finally, I really, truly took him into my heart then. And then I got out of jail, and they let me out of my own recognizance, and I didn't show up to court, which has happened several times. And they took me again. And then I stayed in there for a few months, and some people ministered to me. There were my cellies in there. We started having Bible studies, like really accepted Jesus in my heart then. Like, and I just wanted to change my life. Got in contact with my mother, who I hadn't talked to much in a while, like most of the time I was on the streets for 2.5 years. I didn't really talk to them that much. And it was cool that he did all this stuff for me. I couldn't believe that he was constantly chasing after me. It seemed like the whole time I was trying to run away from him, and I was mocked God in the past, and I mocked Christians and how fake they were. There are a lot of fake Christians or people that call themselves Christians, still to this day, but it doesn't push me away from that, because I didn't understand until then that it was about a relationship with God himself, not the church. The church is important, but I can't judge God based off of what humans are doing, which is what I was doing. I'm like, well, if these people are fake, then God must be fake. It's kind of what my mentality was back then, until he finally got a hold of my heart and showed himself to me in many different ways and saved me from a lot of different circumstances on the streets where I should have been injured. I overdosed 3 times when I was out on the streets from fentanyl cut heroin a lot of times, and like, it was all bad. And then the last time though that I overdosed on it, I did like a $2 piece. It was a long story, but I did like a $2 piece because the person didn't have any more. I did some meth, some heroin, did a shot of it, and I wake up to this girl that was there straddling me on top of me while I was laying on the ground. I thought we were making out or something like that. She had her mouth on my mouth. Come to find out, she was giving me mouth to mouth, but I didn't know what was going on because I was unconscious. She was giving me mouth to mouth because they said I overdosed, and they hit me with Narcan. And I was like, Narcan, I hate Narcan, because that makes you just immediately go into withdrawals. The Narcan that reverses the overdoses. And so I stand up. She's crying now because she thought I was dead. And I was like, what's happening? This is the 3rd time I overdosed in like 2 months. I was trying to get off the heroin, but I couldn't. Like, I still just dabbled in it a little bit, but it almost killed me 3 times, And so this is the 3rd time. And I was like, I have to get off this stuff. And I'm leaving. It was at the park. And I was really high on meth because the the Narcan makes the heroin go away. So I was just like all high on meth, and I'm like, I just almost died. I was freaking out, and so I'm leaving the park, and I said out loud, I'm like, wow, I only did like a $2 piece. How did this happen? And then a voice, audible, clear as day voice, said, if you don't get off this stuff, I'm going to kill you with a $2 piece. And then it went away. And I knew it was God speaking to me or something like that. And I was like, okay, I'm done with the heroin. And I had stopped doing it after that point. And I just stuck with the meth after that point. But the drugs were so bad. Oh, they were so bad. But in jail, yeah, I got a hold of, Jesus got a hold of me a lot in jail. People were ministering to me. He started restoring my relationship with my family. I got some sobriety under my belt in there because I was in there for like 3-4 months. And then I got out, and then I got baptized in 2019, like September. And I was still delusional about sin, and thinks you can dabble in certain things just because I wasn't doing the meth and doing the heroin anymore. I was good. I was still smoking weed because my probation actually said, go get your weed card. Probation pushes marijuana. Like, go get your marijuana card. And the VA was pushing it too. I went to an outpatient rehab during that time, and I was smoking weed in the outpatient rehab. They were fine with it. That's the crazy part about this world we live in. And I was suffering from really bad depression, like crippling depression, and I was messing around with a girl who, still sinning, fornicating, looking at porn, still. Like, I stopped doing the heroin and meth, which it's progressive. If you're struggling with stuff like this, you got to give yourself grace. If you're bettering your life, it's not going to happen instantaneously. I was shedding off all of these things. It took many years for me to let go of all of my vices and my addictions and get delivered from all of these things, So focus on your progress, not perfection. None of us are where we're supposed to be right this moment, but I'm truly grateful for where I'm at now, and was even back then. I'm truly grateful that he got me off the meth and heroin for sure. But I still was smoking the weed and still living in sin. And I was hanging around with people that were Hell's Angels that were dealing meth, but I wasn't doing it. And the gang stalking was still going on. Sober off the meth, people were still following me around. And I was suffering from crippling depression because I think the girl that I had sex with who was living in my apartment was a witch. Looking back, I'm almost certain she was with the stuff that she was doing. And so she was a fentanyl addict, and I'm letting her live in my apartment with me, but I'm not doing fentanyl. It was all bad. And I was on probation, so I knew she couldn't be living there, but I was still letting her live there. Suffering from crippling depression, though. Crippling, like I couldn't get out of bed. I never had that type of depression before, but I couldn't get out of bed. I didn't have a job. The VA had paid for an apartment for like 3 months at that point. No, sorry, 6 months. They paid for the first 3 months out of pocket with or upfront full with the security deposit, and then the 4th month I think they paid for part, and then the 5th and the 6th it was like a tiered down program where I was supposed to take over payments after a certain point. So I kind of just laid in bed for like a month straight, just with depression, and slept with this girl some and smoked weed all the time, and it was miserable. I was like, this is worse than it was before. Like, what the heck? This is terrible. I was thinking, like, why? Like, but I still kept my faith in God, and I was deceived though, and I ended up going to some stuff online led me to go to learn about Reiki and shamanism, and it was talking about how there's these things called like a soul loss or something, where if you have a very traumatic injury or something, part of your soul leaves your body or something, and I was like, that might have happened when I got hit by that truck or something like that, is what I was thinking. So I went to that, and miraculously the depression went away, but the gang stalking didn't go away. And just to let you know, the devil is crafty and will give you issues in your life and then come up with a solution for the same issue that he gave you. He gave me the depression probably through that girl, because it was right when I started sleeping with her. And then I had crippling depression, and then all of a sudden this thing online shows me, hey, go to Reiki, we can help you with your depression. It was a setup, very obviously a setup. And Reiki and shamanism is witchcraft, just to let you know. And so I did that. Let's see, I had like 3 people try to run me off the road, starting like an hour after I recorded them with my phone, telling them that I was going to come to their houses. I had 3 people try to run me off the road, and I had 4 people threaten me with a pistol. And so I was not. I was like, I went and got a pistol, even though I wasn't supposed to have one, because I was had people threaten me with a pistol. I mean, I don't care. I was on probation. I'm like, I'd rather be in prison than like for a prohibited possessor than you know not be armed and somebody's threatening me with a pistol or something. Was my mentality, and so I snapped on some of them. I ended up going to jail for disorderly conduct in my apartment because somebody called the cops because my neighbor threatened me with a pistol and I threatened him with a pistol. And I wasn't going to shoot anybody in the complex though. Like, so, but yeah, he threatened, it was just all bad. Like, I was paranoid, and they were setting me up to try to get me to snap on them. And it worked because I got out a couple days later and then I laid out some of them, went up with my truck, and a bunch of stuff happened. And I got some aggravated assault charges. I was aggravated with the assault with a deadly weapon, I should say. And one of them had hit me with their truck too during that day, and I just kind of was like out of my mind. And I don't know, I guess I threatened the police officer, they claim, or something like that. And so they charged me with like 7 felonies or something like that during COVID too. So I got arrested, went to jail during March 2020. They put me in solitary confinement because, like I said, I got hit by a truck that day too. I was already traumatized in the past from a head injury from getting hit by a truck. So like I was kind of lost my mind. And I was threatening, I think, the DOs or something like that in jail. So they put me in solitary confinement in there, which was a good thing. I know it was God's working. And during that time is when I had that memory block removed where I remembered the whole accident. Because before that, I didn't remember it for like the 3.5 years before that. And it was just a giant blank spot in my memory from after I left this pawn shop to go to the bank to where I was going to get that money. And when I woke up in the ICU, there was just a giant blank spot up until this point when I was in solitary confinement. I managed to get a hold of a Bible. It was miraculously left at my doorstep because in solitary confinement in there's a bunch of cells where I had one cell. It's called the hole. If you've ever been to jail before, it wasn't solitary. It was the hole at first. Solitary confinement was a little later. There's 2 people in there. And then we get to go and take a shower. They only open up one cell at a time. And one day when they opened up the shower, there's a New King James Version study Bible right in front of my door when I never asked for it or anything like that. So I started reading the Bible regularly from that point forward. That was like the first week I was in jail during that arrest. That was the last arrest ever in my life. It was back in 2020, March, so it's been quite a while. But started reading the Bible regularly with my cellie. Then they put me in actual solitary confinement after that point. And I read the Bible, I think it was 2-3 times while I was in there. For about 6 months, I was in solitary confinement by myself, praying regularly. I had my mom send me some books. They were giving me books, the DOs were, to read. Not all of them were Christian, but I was reading a lot of Christian material. They had a tablet. I started watching sermons they had on the tablet because I was in trouble, so they wouldn't let me play games or watch movies or stuff on the tablet, but I still had access to the Christian stuff on there. God made it so I could watch the Christian stuff. So I was listening to Christian music, watching sermons. God really got a hold of me and by myself in there. And I had a lot of introspection and stuff like that, and it changed my life completely. Then they moved me to higher level security where it wasn't, solitary confinement, but we were locked down for like all but 8 hours a day. I was with a lot of people who are murderers in that area and stuff like that. They're actually, they're lost. They're not really that much worse of people if you get to know them better than other people. And there was Christians in there, and I started hanging out with Christians, and we started doing little Bible studies and praying, and I was just working out a lot and stuff like that. And then all of a sudden, about I want to say a year into it, God puts into my mind that I need to go to the Phoenix Dream Center. I had learned about that place, I'm actually here right now because I'm staff here now, but I'll get to that part of the story later. I learned about it when I was on the streets because this is in the area where I was homeless, and they used to minister to a lot of people, and they did a lot of outreaches and stuff, and they tried to get me to come here several times, and they had little outreaches where they'd give out food to the homeless across the street from here, and people would give their testimonies and stuff like that. So I used to sit there and listen to people's testimonies. That was one of the ways God's getting a hold of me. I just remembered I would listen to people's testimonies and get some free food because I was homeless. I didn't have access to food much, besides digging dumpsters or stealing stuff or something like that, or people giving you free food, so, or going to the food bank, so I would go here fairly regularly and listen to testimonies and people testify about Jesus and stuff like that. So he was getting a hold of me, and he told me to come here when I was in jail though. And I was like, for clear as day, like he doesn't speak audibly very often, but like he told me clear as day, come to the Dream Center. He put a few people in my path when I was in jail who had been here, who recommended it. So I'm like, okay, I'm going to the Dream Center when I get out. I got sentenced. I was sitting in jail for 2 years waiting to get sentenced for these charges because it was during the COVID time and the prosecutors were sick, the judges were sick, it was all shut down. The courts half the time they were overbooked, like for people. They were letting out a lot of lesser charges, people out of jail, because they just didn't have the ability and the manpower to handle that type of stuff back then. So they were keeping me in because my bond was like $35,000 or something like that. And I didn't have nobody who was going to post that sort of bond, So my mom's like, we're not posting that. And which is fine with me. It was a good thing that I was left in there. And so I got sentenced to prison, a total of 2.5 years, but 2 years of it was back time because I was in jail for 2 years. So I think I spent like 6 or 7 months in prison. I went down to Yuma in Cibola yard in Yuma. It was like a middle security yard. Hung out with a lot of Christians in there. There are a lot of Christians in jail. You just have to find them, And we had Bible studies. God got a hold of me big time in that place, and just had to go out of fellowship. Went to church a lot in jail.
For the people that don't know what the Dream Center is, explain what the Dream Center is.
Yeah, I'll explain. The Dream Center, I got out in prison in October 2020, and I came to the Phoenix Dream Center. It's a Christian-based, kind of rehab, life recovery type program, inpatient, 6 months to a year long. But God told me before I came here, I was going to become staff and I was going to be here longer than a year. It's a year-long program. I went through the program. I learned a lot of stuff about myself. They quickly promoted me to like a student-level leadership position, like fast. They asked me to be security here. There's a security team here after I was here for 30 days because you can't do those types of ministry positions. So you're here for at least 30 days. And they had me to be security for about 2 months. And they put me as an RA. It's called a resource or residential assistant. It's a student level leadership. You work directly with the leadership and you make sure students are where they're supposed to be at a certain time. You take roll call. You're the middleman between the students and the actual staff here because there's not that much enough staff here to constantly communicate and watch the students and stuff like that. So they got in the men's side like 3 or 4 usually RAs they call them, and the women's have a few of them as well. I completed the program though in last year in October of 2023, and I was working some for a while actually, hold on, let me back up about a month before that. It was September of last year. I had a weird set of circumstances where I found my friend was in the program and he was going to go become a chaplain. And he kept trying to get me to become a chaplain. I didn't really know what one was. And then that year, shortly before I graduated, the chaplaincy school that was part of our church, they have a chaplaincy school there. Which I'm in now, but I'll explain it. They came here, and it was obviously God. He pushed me to come to this meeting they had here, and they asked me to give my testimony. And God was very obviously speaking to me in my spirit, telling me like, you need to sign up for this program. And I was working part-time at that time as a construction demo to make some money because you can work when you're towards the second phase. So at the end of your second phase, you can work. And there was a company they were working with that was letting people work part-time there. So I was making a little bit of money. So I was like, okay, I'm going to sign up to become a chaplain. I didn't really know what one was even. And for those who don't know what a chaplain is, it's basically a member of the clergy of the church, like the leadership kind of in the church that works in secular places, not in a church. There's chaplains in hospitals and hospice places, jails, prisons. The military had them when I was in. The police departments have them. Oddly enough, a lot of major corporations have them. I didn't know that until I was becoming one. And like big corporations like Tyson Meats and stuff has like 150 chaplains or something across their like 50,000 employees or something like that. It's actually, there's quite a few chaplains. But then many people that become chaplains do it on the side as they have a job that they support themselves with, and they do it as like volunteers. So I don't know. But my point is God called me to become a chaplain towards right when I was about to graduate from the program last year. And the school started in January, and he opened up all these opportunities, financial way to pay for the school, the time to be there, transportation to be there. I felt led. I prayed about it, fasted about it, and felt led to ask the director here in this DC school at the Dream Center, the program that I went through, to if I could become staff, because I felt like I was supposed to be staff. So then I talked to them. They made me staff. This was about April of this year or so, and kept going to school, staff here, helping out in the education office here, it's called. We just completed school this about last week, it was on Saturday, so we're on break now. God, there was so much amazing stuff happened to me this year, and and then I learned about deliverance about a year and a half ago. Peter Valenzuela and Michael Smith from the Arizona Deliverance Center came onto campus about a year and a half ago, and I felt like they were talking to me directly, like when they were here the first time, and I started sitting in their classes and learning about deliverance and how a lot of stuff is spiritual, addictions are spiritual. I was struggling with pornography up through the end of last year, even a lot. Like I just couldn't get off of it, and I was trying and I knew it was wrong, and I just couldn't get off of it. But I found out that it was spiritual in nature. Like if you're struggling with those things, I promise Jesus can help you, but you have to reach out and because Christians absolutely can have demons inside of them, in their soul and in their physical body. Don't get it confused. You're not possessed like some people try to twist it up as. Christians cannot be possessed by a demon where it's in your spirit because you have the Holy Spirit. But a Christian absolutely can have demons in their soul, which is where your mind, will, and emotions reside, and they can influence your behavior a lot. Like almost, I can't think of any addictions that are not demonic in nature, really. But if you're struggling with things like drugs or pornography and things like that, 100% you can get delivered from it. And I'd opened my eyes to the spirit world by learning about that stuff back then. And I felt like I was being called into that, and it was weird. The Holy Spirit was like nudging me constantly to that stuff. I after I graduated in October, I started going regularly because I could leave campus whenever I wanted. Excuse me. Because I could leave campus whenever I wanted, so I started going regularly, paying for like a lift or taking a bus over to the Arizona Deliverance Center, and I started getting more serious. So I was like, I'm going to become a chaplain. I have to like get off these, like started living a more holy life, and like, I mean, that doesn't mean you live a perfect life, but you can't live in intentional active sin, and so I pressed into my deliverance more, and I started really taking it more seriously and worked on the thing called the Miracle List there that they have, and then I did a one-on-one with Brother Rick there, and it helped me some. Like I started doing it way less, but I wasn't letting it go, and like I said, you got to focus on the progress, not the perfection. It was getting better, because I used to be like a daily thing a long time ago, and then it became like a every few days, and then it was like a once a month thing, and that's not okay still, but I was getting better, and it was getting less of a grip on my life where I couldn't control it, and then I finally got pressed into it more this year into my deliverance and got delivered from the deeper rooted stuff, that was causing that in the first place and causing me to want to go to that. And I've learned more about the fear of the Lord. That's really what helps me stop doing that stuff, is the fear of the Lord. Is having a reverence and love and awe and respect for the Lord is something that I was lacking for sure. Even up until more recently, like in the last few months, I didn't even understand that fully. I started reading a book in the last week, kind of convicted me. I reading a book called The Awe of God by John Bevere, and it's like opening my eyes about the fear of the Lord. And it's not being scared of God where you're actively pulling away from God because you're afraid he's going to do something to you. That's not what it means. It's you're afraid of doing things that will drive a wedge in between your relationship and separate you from him for sure. And granted, God could do some crazy stuff. He could wipe us out if he wanted to, but it's having a reverential love and awe and respect for him and not wanting to do things that will hurt him because he cares about me, is what I realized a long time ago in this class. And when I do things like look at pornography, when I look at women in like they're a piece of meat, or something like that, even though they're a daughter of God, or they're at least, made in his image, and there's somebody's daughter, there's somebody's wife, there's somebody's sister, they're, when I was looking at them like that, it's a wrong to look at them like that, but I used to look at women like that for sure. But he's taken me to levels that I didn't even know existed in my faith walk, especially now that I got a lot of deliverance, and he's called me into this deliverance ministry now, where I started going more to the Arizona Deliverance Center weekly, and I started getting permission to take people from the Dream Center, uh, from the leadership here to there that want to experience that type of stuff, and trying to get them help too from the things that God's helped me from, because I've been delivered from so many things that I didn't even understand were spiritual in nature until He opened my eyes to the spirit world. Promise, most everything has spiritual nature or spiritual roots in it. We are basically spiritual beings having a physical human experience, so there's demons and there's angels, and God is a spirit, and it's crazy. And the world will convince you that it's not a real thing, but I promise you it's more real than this fake world that we live in. Everything, so much stuff is fake in this world. God is real, and the spirit world is real. And He's opened up my eyes. He's put some amazing people like Sean and Michael Carter and stuff in my life. And Michael Carter helped me out with a lot of deliverance, one-on-one stuff, to keep picking off things, because I was still very critical and negative and constantly complaining and fault finding about stuff, and gossiping about stuff, even when I got, and I got rid of a lot of that stuff. And I still struggle with a little, but it's like peeling off layers, like I said, you can't live in sin and live in the world for many years and expect it all to go away with the drop of a dime, but it takes constant effort, because we're in a war, people. They like to downplay it in the church. They don't talk about the spirit world enough, but there is an adversary. I realize that constantly is trying to destroy my life, because there's demons that work for the devil, and they are assigned to me specifically. I think there's ones that are assigned to me specifically, that their whole purpose is to try to get back in me once we booted them out, because Jesus Christ can get you delivered, but they will try to come back. So getting deliverance is not so hard, but maintaining my deliverance was the hard thing, because I went back to it, several times, and finally, like, the shame, and people like, you can't keep doing this because it's going to get worse. People are telling me, and it will get worse. But thankfully, God got a hold of me before I allowed it to get worse even. And I'm taking it way more seriously now. And I have this fear of the Lord that He's helping my life. He's putting people in my life that will tell me the truth in a loving way, and that I can reach out to. And I've put these, this fellowship with strong Christian believers at the Deliverance Center, and through some Bible study groups that we do on Zoom, and people here at the Dream Center. There's some strong believers here that I fellowship with now, that I can open up to, that I never really had those types of healthy friendships before. Like I said, when I was younger, I just didn't, I just didn't trust people and stuff like that. So I can open up more to people now and ask them for advice, and just ask them for prayers and pray regularly and stuff like that. And God has truly changed my life. He's taken me to levels that I didn't know existed. I'm filled with this peace now, even when in situations in the past where I would have been anxious, fearful, worried, worked up. I have peace now. It's not that I don't care. It's that I trust in Him to work out the situation, because I can't control it. Most things in this life, I don't have control over anything that's not my own choices. Basically, what I choose to do, those are about the only things that I have control over. My own physical body movements and the things I choose to think about, and my decisions, those are the only things I have control of, and I gotta let the rest of it go. And for the longest, I didn't understand that, and it's changing my life, and getting to know God more through His Word and through other people and through prayer and fasting and stuff has truly opened my eyes and taken me to new levels. But it requires a constant daily thing, because God wants a relationship with me. But I've heard it compared to, like, if you have a wife and you never talk to her, hardly ever, do you really consider that a relationship? Like, you hardly ever talk to your wife? How are you going to have a relationship? How are you going to get to know her better? How are you going to get to know what she's feeling or what she wants from you if you don't talk to her? The same is with God. If I don't ever talk to Him, and His Word is the Bible is how He talks to us, and through prayer, if I don't pray and read His Word, how am I going to actually have a relationship with Him? And sadly, many Christians, and I know there's going to be a lot of ones watching this, I know that's how you live your life, and it doesn't have to be that way. God wants a closer relationship with us, and He's shown me that. And because deliverance is not about just casting out spirits out of me, it's about living a holier life and getting closer to God. Because I've heard a good comparison that God is like the sun, basically, like the sun in the sky. The closer you get to Him, He will burn out things that are not of him in your life. It'll just break off. It's just truly amazing what he's doing in my life. And he's restored my relationship with my family. I see them regularly. He's restoring my relationships with people's families here constantly. He's helping us. He helps me overcome things that I struggled with for years. He's helping me give a purpose. He's helped me have actually goals in life and wants and desires and dreams that are healthy, and to help out other people is really what I want, and to do his will is what I want. And he's calling me to help out with homeless ministry stuff in the future and help out people get delivered from these things that have been tormenting them and holding them in bondage for years, because he did that for me. Because the word of God says that we overcome by the power of the blood and the word of our testimony. So as you can hear, my testimony shows you that if I can do it, anybody else can do it, because I'm not anybody special. So God doesn't show favors. He just requires us he wants him to be my number one in my life. Any other thing is called idolatry. If I have any other thing that's driving a wedge in between me and God, it's idolatry. And it's hard. The walk is hard, because Jesus says that narrow is the path that leads to life, and wide is the path that leads to destruction. And he's the life. He's the way to life. So he's the path I need to be on. And it's hard. And we have to give ourselves grace, and we have to give other people grace, because God gives us grace, and his mercies are due every day. And if I fall short, which I do, I still fall short all the time, because that's why I need Jesus. Because if I could live a perfect life where my salvation is based off my works, then I wouldn't even need Jesus. So that's why God sent Jesus to save me. And I love him so much for changing my life and delivering me. And I thank him so much for doing the things that he's done and putting these people in my life and allowing me to even give my testimony, so that hopefully it will reach some of you. Because I promise you, he loves you and he wants to help you, and he wants to change your life and to save you. You don't have to live your life that way anymore. If you are a Christian, and he can set you free, but you have to get closer to him. And you can reach out to me or other people that I know, and we can help you get closer to him, because he's the only one that can help you. But I can help you, lead you closer to him if you need help. So please reach out to me if you need to. Okay, we love you. God bless you all. Thank you.
You said that your mom and dad had to cut you off. What's your relationship with them right now?
I just saw them earlier today, actually. They let me stay the night over there. For the longest, when I was on the streets, yeah, they had to cut me off. They had to stop talking to me, because you enable people. But he's restored our relationship, and I know he's working on my family.
Somebody that is watching the testimony, they watched it, and they relate to a lot of the things that you have talked about. Would you pray for them in closing?
Pray for them right now?
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, Lord Jesus, I thank you, Lord, for this day. I thank you for this opportunity to give this testimony. I thank you for my brother Sean here, Lord. I hope and pray that you soften the hearts of the people that hear this, and you convict them and show them that you are real in undeniable and unmistakable ways, Lord. And if they're questioning it, I pray that you show them in ways that they can't rationalize, Lord, like I used to. And then draw them to you and open up doors for them to be saved if they're unsaved. And if they're lukewarm or something like that, help them realize that your mercies are new every day, Lord. And you want them to get closer to you, and you're willing to forgive anything if we repent, Lord Jesus. And we thank you for your mercy and your love and your grace, Lord. And I pray that you send this out to as many people as possible that will hear this, whose conditions of their hearts are in the right place to receive this. In Jesus' name, amen.